Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 537, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with perspective and balance. Here, I look at how to balance our emotions and activities to find a better way of living. Then, it's on to Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. This book, even though it's from 1960, is a classic self-help book dealing with the power of positive thinking, among other things. Today's show will feature background footage from Bear Wallow Mountain. To get there from Girton, North Carolina, take Bear Wallow Mountain Road off of Highway 74A. First it's paved, then the road turns to dirt. On the top of the ridge, it turns to paved again. That's where you park. The trail is off to the left, going up Bear Wallow Mountain, where on the top there's a cow pasture and some radio towers. Well, they're probably cell phone towers, but maybe other little radio towers, not the giant ones. Whatever. So, now, let's continue with perspective and balance. And while we rest and relax, we could adjust our perspective. We could look at things in a new light. Sure. We just have to think about how we feel about things. Do we get too emotionally involved? Are we too upset with a situation, a certain situation? Does it really bother us? Does a similar situation bother other people less? Well, if so, perhaps we need to talk to them and gain their perspective. Sometimes it's not all or nothing. Sometimes we can live in an imperfect world. Sure, that's just the way it is. So we have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and hopefully it will work out right. But chances are it's not going to be perfect or work out right every time. And we just have to deal with that. And we just have to look at how we see ourselves in relation to others. We can't be too hard on ourselves for whatever reason. We have to realize chances are we have more friends than we think we do. We have to realize that life doesn't always have to be so difficult, and that sometimes we can take an approach that makes things easier for us. And perhaps we could do so and still maintain our dignity. Sure. We don't have to compromise too much, but sometimes we need to compromise some to allow us to have a better time or to allow things to work out better for everyone. And it's just how we see ourselves and how much, emphasis we put on things like perfection or having everything just right, or how we see things sometimes if things might not be as dire as we think they are. We just have to live and learn. But be open to things like that. Be open to concepts that life might not be as difficult or dire as you think, despite the horrible situations that might be going on. So we have to work on that and work on our focus. Focus our energy into things that are worthwhile, and focus our energy on things that will give us the most payback. Well, in terms of money, but in terms of everything, such as making us feel good and helping others. We have to balance it all. Have time to help others, have time to help ourselves and entertain ourselves, and have time to make money or learn or do other practical things. So we have to have time for all of that. So we have to make sure we focus enough energy and time on each of those areas. And we have to look at our intentions and see how we see things. What do we want to do? And why? Sure. And of course we can, if it doesn't seem right, we can think about it and or talk to our friends. So we just have to work on things. Work on our perspective and balance. Now, it is time for Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. This is a classic self-help book from 1960. It deals with the power of positive thinking, among other things. So let's dive in. Going to page XIX in the preface. The self-image is the key to human personality and human behavior. Change the self-image and you change the personality and the behavior. But more than this, the self-image sets the boundaries of individual accomplishment. It defines what you can and cannot do. Expand the self-image and you expand the area of the possible. The development of an adequate, realistic self-image will seem to imbue the individual with new capabilities, new talents, and literally turn failure into success. Now, let's go to page 9 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. There are the young girls who are convinced that they are ugly merely because their mouth, nose, or bust measurement does not exactly match that of the currently reigning movie queen. There are men who believe that their ears are too big or their noses too long. No ethical plastic surgeon would even consider operating on these people, but unfortunately the quacks, or so-called beauty doctors, whom no medical association will admit to membership, have no such qualms. Such imaginary ugliness is not at all uncommon. A recent survey of college co-eds showed that 90% were dissatisfied in some way with their appearance. If the words normal and average mean anything at all, it is obvious that 90% of our population cannot be abnormal or different or defective in appearance. Yet similar surveys have shown that approximately the same percentage of our general population find some reasoning to be ashamed of their body image. These people react just as if they suffered from an actual disfigurement. They feel the same shame. They develop the same fears and anxieties. Their capacity to really live is fully blocked and choked by the same sort of psychological roadblocks. Their scars, though mental and emotional rather than physical, are just as debilitating. Later on page 9, continuing on to page 10, the secret is this: to really live, that is, to find life reasonably satisfying, you must have an adequate and realistic self-image that you can live with. You must find yourself acceptable to you. You must have a wholesome self-esteem. You must have a self that you can trust and believe in. You must have a self that you are not ashamed to be, and one that you can feel free to express creatively rather than hide or cover up. You must have a self that corresponds to reality so that you can function effectively in a real world. You must know yourself, both your strengths and your weaknesses, and be honest with yourself concerning both. Your self-image must be a reasonable approximation of you, being neither more than you are or less than you are. Now let's go to page 26. Dr. Weiner has said that at no time in the foreseeable future will scientists be able to construct an electronic brain computer anywhere near comparable to the human brain. I think that our gadget-conscious public has shown an unawareness of the special advantages and special disadvantages of electronic machinery as compared with the human brain, he says. The number of switching devices in the human brain vastly exceeds the number in any computing machine yet developed or even thought of for design in the near future. But even should such a machine be built, it would lack an operator. A computer does not have a forebrain, nor does it have an eye. It cannot pose problems to itself. It has no imagination and cannot set goals for itself. It cannot determine which goals are worthwhile and which are not. It has no emotions. It cannot feel. It works only on new data fed to it by an operator. By feedback data it secures from within its own sense organs and from information previously stored. Now let's go to page 27, continuing on to page 28 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. Dr. J.B. Rhine, as head of Duke University's Parapsychology Laboratory, performed proved experimentally that man has access to knowledge, facts, and ideas other than his own individual memory or stored information from learning or experience. Telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition have been established by scientific laboratory experiments. Dr. Rhine's finding that man possesses some extrasensory factor, which he calls psi, is no longer doubted by scientists who have seriously reviewed his work. As Professor R.H. Thales of Cambridge University, author of Straight and Crooked Thinking, has stated, the reality of the phenomenon must be regarded as proved, as certainly as anything in scientific research can be proved. We have found, said Dr. Rhine, that there is a capacity for acquiring knowledge that transcends the sensory functions. This extrasensory capacity can give us knowledge, certainly of objective and very likely of subjective states, knowledge of matter, and most probably of minds. Schubert is said to have told a friend that his own creative process consisted in remembering a melody that neither he nor anyone else has ever thought of before. Many creative artists, as well as psychologists who have made a study of the creative process, have been impressed by the similarity between creative inspiration, sudden revelation, intuition, etc., and ordinary human memory. Searching for a new idea or an answer to a problem is in fact very similar to searching memory for a name you have forgotten. You know the name is there, or else you would not search. The scanner in your brain scans back over stored memory until the desired name is recognized or discovered. Now, let's go to page 31 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. The means by which your success mechanism works often take care of themselves and do so effortlessly when you supply the goal to your brain. The precise action steps will come to you without stress, tension, or worry about how you are going to accomplish the result you seek. Many people make the mistake of interfering with their success mechanism by demanding a how before a goal is clearly established. After you've formed a mental image of the goal you seek to create, the how will come to you, not before. Remain calm and relaxed, and the answers will arrive. Any attempt to force the ideas to come will not work. As Brian Tracy wrote, in all mental workings, effort defeats itself. Now, let's go to page 42. And what is this magic that accomplishes so much for salesmen? It is something called role-playing, and you should know about it, because if you let it, it may help you double your sales. What is role-playing? Well, it is simply imagining yourself in various sales situations. then solving them in your mind until you know what to say and what to do whenever the situations come up in real life. It is what is called on the football field skull practice. The reason why it accomplishes so much is that selling is simply a matter of situations. One is created every time you talk to a customer. He says something or asks a question or raises an objection. If you always know how to counter what he says or answer his question or handle the objection, you make sales. A role-playing salesman at night when he is alone will create these situations. He will imagine the prospect throwing the widest kind of curves at him. Then he will work out the best answer to them. No matter what the situation is, you can prepare for it beforehand by means of imagining yourself and your prospect face to face while he is raising objections and creating problems, and you are handling them properly. Now, let's go to page 48 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. The aim of self-image psychology is not to create a fictitious self that is all-powerful, arrogant, egotistic, and all-important. Such an image is as inappropriate and unrealistic as the inferior image of self. Our aim is to find the real self and to bring our mental images of ourselves more in line with the objects represented by our goals. However, it is common knowledge among psychologists that most of us underrate ourselves, shortchange ourselves, and sell ourselves short. Actually, there is no such thing as a superiority complex. People who seem to have one are actually suffering from feelings of inferiority. Their superior self is a fiction, a cover-up to hide from themselves and others their deep down feelings of inferiority and insecurity. Now, let's go to page 60 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. It is no exaggeration to say that every human being is hypnotized to some extent, either by ideas he has uncritically accepted from others or ideas he has repeated to himself or convinced himself are true. These negative ideas have exactly the same effect on our behavior as the negative ideas implanted into the mind of a hypnotized subject by a professional hypnotist. Have you ever seen a demonstration of honest-to-goodness hypnosis? If not, let me describe to you just a few of the more simple phenomena that result from the hypnotist's suggestion. The hypnotist tells a football player that his hand is stuck to the table and that he cannot lift it. It is not a question of the football player not trying. He simply cannot. He strains and struggles until the muscles of his arms and shoulder stand out like cords, but his hand remains fully rooted to the table. He tells a championship weightlifter that he cannot lift a pencil from the desk. And although normally he can hoist a 400-pound weight overhead, he now actually cannot lift the pencil. Strangely enough, in the above instances, hypnosis does not weaken the athletes. They are potentially as strong as ever, but without realizing it consciously, they are working against themselves. On the one hand, they try to lift their hand or the pencil by voluntary effort and actually contract the proper lifting muscles. But on the other hand, the idea you cannot do it causes contrary muscles to contract quite apart from their will. The negative idea causes them to defeat themselves. They cannot express or bring into play their actual available strength. The gripping strength of a third athlete has been tested on a dynamometer and has been found to be 100 pounds. All his effort and straining cannot budge the needle beyond the 100-pound mark. Now he is hypnotized and told, "You are very, very strong, stronger than you have ever been in your life. Much, much stronger. You are surprised at how strong you are." Again, the gripping strength of his hand is tested. This time, he easily pulls the needle to the 125-pound mark. Now, let's go to page 62 of Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz MD. Feelings of inferiority originate not so much from facts or experiences, but our conclusions regarding facts and our evaluations of experiences. For example, the fact is that I am an inferior weightlifter and an inferior dancer. This
Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 @CaseyWaters.com.